The speaking of Israel and Hamas, they've just announced, just as we were seated, that they would extend the pause for another 2 days. How do you think this pause should be best utilized? I mean, of course, we speak of the hostages.
The objective of the pause is to get hostages back. And there is understandably very considerable pressure on all administrations, but certainly ours and obviously that of Prime Minister Netanyahu to get the return of the hostages. In Hamas, what this is, they're on the ropes. This is a fighter that has been taking some heavy blows, even though, as we suspect, reportedly, the leader of Hamas inside Gaza is now down in the south and down probably around Khan Yunis or underneath Khan Yunis, which is his hometown. And so they're regrouping, but so are the Israelis. And the Israelis are redistributing ammunition, restockpiling, doing maintenance, getting a breather. Urban combat is incredibly demanding for soldiers on the ground. It just, the flow of adrenaline. We used to actually speculate how many rooms can a soldier clear before you just don't have it anymore. And because every single time that individual goes through the door with a team, a stack, the adrenaline is just flowing big time. And of course, there's also this tension. You never know if you're going to be greeted with a hand grenade or a handshake or at least hands in the air. And so the challenges are enormous. This gives them a chance to actually get a few nights sleep, maybe to get a shower, you get a decent meal, all the rest of this. But clearly Hamas is going to string this out as long as they can. It's a very cynical way that they're going about this, needless to say, after a truly barbaric, unspeakable acts that not only did they carry them out, but then they even videoed them and bragged about them and uploaded them. But then the campaign's going to resume. Ultimately, I think that there has to be a campaign to the south. Again, let's keep in mind, what are the big ideas so far? The biggest of the big ideas is destroy Hamas and dismantle the political wing. Destroy, in military terminology, means to render the enemy incapable of accomplishing his mission without reconstitution. Keep your eye on reconstitution because you have to prevent that. That's another task post-Hamas that has to be ensured. We have all learned that the hard way because the Islamic State, which we destroyed when it was still Al-Qaeda in Iraq during the surge, destroyed it, rendered it incapable of accomplishing its mission, and then kept destroyed for 3 and our Iraqi security partners shouldering more and more of that burden. But then they took their eye off it when our combat forces left and Prime Minister Maliki pursued highly sectarian actions that unhinged the relationship with the Sunni. They were able to reconstitute. A couple of years later, you have the first ever Islamist extremist caliphate, which we then had to go back in and help the Iraqi and then Syrian partners destroy. So you can't let them back up once you have, again, taken them out and cannot allow them to reconstitute.
Well, that's the point that you've in your counterinsurgency field manual,
exactly.
The idea of holding.
Well, you have to hold. And so this is, I think there are some additional big ideas, if you will. I know that they are conscious of this because I have dialogue with individuals and they're trying to come to grips. I mean, the obvious one is, of course, who will administer Gaza? And here there's, the Secretary of State of the US rightly says, well, it should be a Palestinian entity. Of course, it has to be competent, capable, trustworthy. Is there such an entity? I don't think so, actually. If it was, it might be operational in the West Bank for starters. And then would it really want to go in on the backs of Israeli tanks to take over? That's obviously problematic. The idea that maybe Arabs could come together and they could have an interim transitional authority of some type, there doesn't seem to be enthusiasm for that. So it's appearing as if Israel's going to have to do what they don't want to do. I mean, they pulled out of Gaza for a reason in 2005. Right. We then insisted on elections in 2006. Hamas gets elected and the next year, basically, they take over and there's never been an election since then. So yet that's what appears to be what's going to be necessary, not desirable. All of these are bad options. The question is, which is the only option that's going to be left standing? Because I think, again, not only do you have to administer Gaza in terms of providing humanitarian assistance, restoration of basic services, overseeing reconstruction, all of this, you also have to ensure that Hamas and Islamic Jihad, the junior partner, which doesn't always cooperate with Hamas, by the way, that they cannot reconstitute after you have destroyed them and dismantled their political architecture in Gaza. So again, who's going to do that? And that matters. And it's all well and good for those in other countries to say that's ill-advised. Okay, well, what do you have instead? If you assume, and I do, that Hamas has to be destroyed. Hamas has shown itself to be irreconcilable. It is a terrorist army, if you will, in the way that the Islamic State was irreconcilable, a terrorist army. It had to be destroyed, not reconciled. Maybe some elements of it. And by the way, there will be tens of thousands of essentially bureaucrats that used to be maybe paid by Hamas in some cases, some paid by the PA. But those are going to have to be, somehow you're going to have to put them to work. Because again, who knows how to run the water system?
You don't want to repeat the debathification.
So exactly. So yeah, no, talk about a big idea. Not only do we not have a good, solid post-conflict, post-war plan for Iraq, we compound the challenge by firing the Iraqi army without telling them how we could enable them to take care of their families. So you've created hundreds of thousands of individuals whose incentive is to oppose the new Iraq rather than support it. And then you compound that by firing the Ba'ath Party down to level 4, which is the largely Western educated bureaucrats we needed to run a country that we didn't understand without an agreed reconciliation process. So again, so that's who oversees that part of it. But then also, as you go to the South, again, the sheer number of civilians, because they've been pushed down there, I'm not sure where they can go. And beyond, you want to start doing more of the clear hold, because otherwise the enemy will come back in behind you anyway. So this is why it consumes soldiers at such substantial numbers, not necessarily in casualties, although that's challenging too. But again, and then showing them this is what life will be like now that we've separated you from the extremists. So I think those, and I know people are working on this. I know that in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, they're grappling with this. There's all kinds of different folks with different length screwdrivers from different capitals of the world that are helping them, as I used to get helped as well. But again, this is going to be the challenge that lies ahead, and it is a very, very formidable one. Again, war among the people is fiendishly difficult in urban areas.